It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On Bulls, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, a show for the most passionate fan base in the NBA.
Covington playing LaVine, topside three ball, bam! Onions, baby onions! Zach LaVine in the Bulls!
Your number one source for Chicago Bulls news and stories.
LaVine to White, this time he gives it to Williams for three. The rookie! The Pata! Oh my goodness, what a shot!
Hosts Jordan Maly and Matt Peck dive into the best Bulls news and stories around the NBA.
It's Jordan Maly. Jordan, great to see you through our 670 score scope. Yep.
Where is he?
And it's right over there, Bill. Are you flat out kidding me?
Matt Peck used to do a great job with the Bulls Outsider Show. Now he's doing Locked On Bulls.
There he is, human full-burn.
Oh, don't mess with the booch.
But watch this crossover. Casper the Friendly Ghost.
In and out right there from Thaddeus.
So kick back,
not.
relax, and get ready for the best hour of your day.
I'm not.
You can just see the vibe.
And these guys are men.
Locked On Bulls starts now.
I love it. Pass to LaVine with a right-handed jackhammer slam. Oh, my goodness, that was filthy.
Here are your hosts, Jordan Maly and Matt Peck.
I'm getting out the dancing shoes.
Locked On Bulls, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Jordan Maly. Along with me is Matt Peck. Follow us on Twitter at Jordan C. Maly, at Bulls_Peck, and at Locked On Bulls. Hit us up on our text and voicemail line, 331-979-1369. Your text, your voicemails, anything you got for us, 331-979-1369. Today's episode is brought to you by Built Bar. Go to BuiltBar.com right now and use the promo code LOCKED15. You get 15% off your next order. Happy Friday, Matt. A little bit sad that this season is ending. Final two games of the regular season. Great, I don't know, I guess good win last night, all for nothing, but still good win. Couple good moments in there, and we'll get into those as well as some comments from Donovan and a few players. But first, how are you, and how'd you enjoy the game last night?
What up, Jordan? What up, Bulls Nation? I enjoyed the game. For a few reasons. That Coby White dunk is one of the coolest things we've seen all season. It was number 2 in SportsCenter top 10 last night, and it deserved.
What was number 1?
What
number
was one was a hockey goal where the dude whacked the puck out of midair with his stick.
Okay.
They always give love to those weird hockey goals. But a pretty convincing win. The Bulls pretty much were up 20 from first quarter on. The final score was not that close, but that's what you expect when you're playing a team that sat 8 of its guys. I mean, credit to Stanley Johnson for putting up what did he have? 35? Yeah.
35 from Stanley Johnson, dude. Like, what?
Dude's a beast. Or he was last night, but if the Bulls are still actually thinking, hey, we can control, let's get the win. Let's put a little bit of pressure on Washington. Wizards play the Cavs tonight. That should be all she wrote. Should be a gimme. I also just saw on my Twitter timeline, no Kevin Love, Garland and Osman are both questionable. So, this could all be over tonight. But I guess credit to the Bulls for going out and getting a win that they needed.
Yeah, like you said, the Coby dunk was probably the biggest highlight from that. Just closing out a game. I did notice that in this game, it was a little strange, and I guess it's not strange because they said they're going to finish out the season the same way that they've started, with the same mentality, is like continue to build that winning culture. And like even up like 12-14 at one point, it was pretty much over. They still had the starters in. Like Patrick Williams didn't close that game. It was Garrett Temple and Thaddeus Young. I know he had brought like real late when it was really over, but were you surprised at all to see like sort of like the vets out there, the dudes that have been closing games all season for you in sort of a meaningless way kind of close things out?
Well, look, I mean, I don't think Billy Donovan thought that game last night was meaningless. I think until they are mathematically eliminated, which might happen tonight, they're going out and trying to win to keep their season alive. Now, some people like me disagree with that and think that they should have been losing out starting 8 games ago, but to see, a lead that was shrinking a little bit and you say, all right, I'm going to roll with the guys who have been playing the best for me tonight down the stretch because we need this game. We can't let anything funky happen in the final 6 minutes of this fourth quarter. Because how many times have we seen that script play out this season? This team has coughed up a lot of leads, and it's put them where they are now in this position, where it's a do or die game for the last 5 games of the season. So no, I wasn't surprised. And the other thing that Donovan said about P. Will not being out there late is that he wanted to reward and ride Markkanen, who was playing well last night. And Lowry's not a guy you typically see closing this season. And Donovan had some interesting comments after the game about Lowry's undetermined future, but said, hey, Lowry played well last night. So, that's who I rolled with.
We should talk about Markkanen for a second. But first, before we do that, I just want people that weren't maybe watching the broadcast just to hear the Coby dunk again, because it's just so fucking awesome. Stacy and Adam are the best. Here it is.
Bulls running. Coby White to the net.
Coby don't do it like that. Who said Coby don't like the dunk? Woo! That was nasty. He got me out my seat, I wasn't expecting that. Wow.
Coby White just sucked the gravity out of the building.
Stanley Johnson, welcome to the poster machine.
Immediate reaction, poster machine, but I think
Classic Stacy. It was great,
Stanley,
man.
Stanley Johnson got the last laugh with 35 points, though, even though he got posterized.
He certainly did. He got pissed off after he got dunked on like that. He went off, but you don't see that from Coby too often. Even when you see him driving to the rack, you see him laying the ball in more than you see him dunking. So that was a fun moment. That was definitely a fun moment. But to me, it wasn't as important as the other elements of what Coby showed in that game, which were continued improvement as a point guard. He had 10 assists last night. It was only the third time this season he put up a double-double that included 10 or more assists, which is not ideal for your starting point guard, right? You would want that number to be higher. But 10 assists, I think only 2 turnovers. We're seeing Coby develop his ability to read the situation in half-court offenses. He was making better entry passes to Vooch last night. And, not ideal that Vooch had an off night, but even still, entry passes have been plaguing this team all season long, as far as how bad they've been at it. And Coby's been better at that. He's been better at making reads and making the right plays and the right passes, as opposed to knowing also when he should shoot or look to attack the basket himself. It's a silver lining. This is a frustrating end to the season, and we still don't know what's going to be the backcourt rotation of this team next season. And who knows, AK and Eversley could very well still be looking out there for a point guard this offseason. But seeing Coby play better in this last stretch of games is certainly encouraging.
Yeah, it's cool. And the more playmakers you can have, or the more playmakers you can create on this team, the better off this team is, especially around Zach. I'm thinking too, I don't even necessarily know if Coby needs to be the guy to average 8 to 10 assists a night if Vooch is the centerpiece, right? If Vooch can continue to pass the way he has recently, last 2 weeks, where he's having 5 or 6 assists a night. Mm-hmm. If he can do that alongside your 4, if Patrick Williams becomes your 4, or even if they bring Tice back, and those two guys have shown a little bit of ability to pass, I don't know if you need Coby to do that. But if they do address the point guard situation, I'm curious how that might change a little bit of the plans. But I always think about AK in Denver and how Jokic is set up there and how they used Murray there as well and filled in the gaps. If that's the mentality to go to, I don't know. Maybe we don't need Coby to necessarily get us 7, 8, 9, 10 assists consistently. It is nice to see him be able to do that, though, right?
Yeah, it's nice to have that option. Like you said, it's maybe not as necessary if one of your bigs can be a facilitator himself, and like the Jokic model in Denver, be a guy who averages 8 assists a game. Vooch isn't quite there, but he's certainly not that far off. He had another 6 assist night last night. And the Bulls also have Thad, another big who is great facilitating and finding open looks for his teammates. He had 7 assists last night. Once again, flirting with that first career triple-double. 10, 8, and 7 for Thad last night. But if you're getting that kind of ball movement and facilitating from one or multiple of your bigs, then no, you don't need the Rondo CP3 style point guard whose only job is to go out there and get looks for his teammates. But if the Bulls plan on continuing to see what they have in Coby next season and moving forward while he's still on a rookie contract, it's nice to see him make those strides himself.
Agreed. And I'm glad that he's and hopefully he can finish out the last 2 games with good games too, because it's nice to finish the season on a good note, especially the stretch he had coming out of the All-Star break with missing Zach. His comments after the game were awesome too. We heard him on the radio too, and I didn't catch it after post game, but hearing him talk about he's glad he went through those struggles, I think was really, really cool. We want to hear from a couple of other players as well. Want to hear from Thaddeus Young. He talked about Zach, was asked about Zach's development this season and what he ultimately could do for the Bulls in the short and long term. Also want to hear Billy Donovan's follow-up on what Thad talked about in shoot-around. We talked about it on yesterday's episode.
Well, I mean, the first thing is Thad's been amazing to work with all year long. I think for a guy that's been in the league for 14 years, I think would be unwise to use his experiences. And I always say this, the players play the game. They see things through a different lens. Coaches see things sometimes through a different lens, but you got to collaborate and work together, and we're kind of all in it together, and we're all trying to pursue, a common goal every night, and that's to try to win. And you want to be able to have those kind of dialogues back and forth. And I think as a coach, it's important to certainly take feedback from players. I think it's important that players take feedback from me. And I think it's important that we, all figure out things that we have to do. I just got an enormous amount of respect for Thad. Here's a guy that everything has changed for him during the course of the season. He obviously was a guy that was in a primary facilitating role and did a great job with that. I think it's been pretty well documented how well he's done in the locker room, as a leader. The trade happens. We're kind of a lot of players in the front court. His role changes. He has to do different things. He's always been about winning and what's best for the team. He's been in the starting lineup. He's been out of the starting lineup. And whenever I've gone to him and say, listen, I think this is best, he's always been incredibly supportive. So, I'm grateful to have a guy like that around, not only to be able to communicate and talk with him, but also, to have a guy like that to help younger players. And I think, going forward, at least when I first came here, to have those relationships and to build those relationships. And I kind of mentioned this before, voluntary cooperation. We all got to cooperate and work with one another. And Thad's been a great guy to work with all year long.
Damn high praise, man. Damn high praise, and he deserves it too. It's so staunchly different from the way that he was utilized, even just off the court, man, last season. And we talked in plenty last episode about that. But very cool to see that Billy Donovan is collaborating with his players and actually listening and getting feedback, whether it be positive or negative, and utilizing that.
Yeah, it's kind of exactly what Thad was talking about the other day that we were discussing with a player who's feeling like they're being listened to. Listened to. Seems like a simple concept, right? But, obviously there is a level of I'm the coach, you're the player. There is an authority figure, and then there is the person who is, beholden to said authority. And to a point, that is true for NBA coaches and NBA players. But this is a players' league. It became a players' league a while ago. And Billy Donovan is one of the guys who's smart enough to know that. And it's not like that is some superstar with a big ego who's like, a LeBron telling David Blatt, no, to hell with this play that you drew up in our timeout. I'm going to change it, and I'm going to take the last shot because I'm LeBron, and who the hell are you? You're only David Blatt. It's not quite like that, but Thad is a player who has been in the league a long time and is respected. And Billy Donovan recognizes that. So if there are opportunities for Billy Donovan to basically give some of his leadership and coaching responsibilities to one of his elder statesman veteran players to say, hey, Thad, whatever you see happening on the court with one of your younger teammates that needs to be corrected, go correct it. Go tell them. Go call them out and help them because I trust you. That is not a trust that Jim Boylan put in any of his players.
And it's part of the reason why I continue to say I think Jim Boylan had some good ideas, like some good basketball ideas, but just did not communicate them well. And it can be, especially now, man, like now you can't get away with that. Like we're seeing the type of red ass coaching mentality happen in college, and usually you don't get a whole ton of pushback. Like if guys don't like it before, even 10 years ago, if guys didn't like it, you transferred. Sorry, too bad. If you don't like it, too bad, don't play. Now there's
You mean like
pushback
those
to the
players that transferred out of Utah when Jim was the coach there?
that, yeah, absolutely. I think about too, like the Tom Izzo stuff, like over the last couple of years, like him screaming and visibly like red and grabbing a player's jersey and like people criticizing for that, but Draymond Green and some other players that committed to him and actually listened and was like, nah, like if you actually know him, both of them are going at each other with full positive intent, like both going in aiming for the same goal. And I think that's what's going on here too, is like Billy Donovan and Thaddeus Young might not agree on everything, but at least they're hearing each other, being open and honest, and how can they move in a direction that gets them to their ultimate goals. So it only helps you to have a good relationship with your coach, right? Even if you're not going to be here long term, it still only helps you. It helps the coach. I don't ever understand why Boylan didn't ever want to try and adapt, but I guess I'll never get that answer.
Try to pretend. I mean, who could forget the leadership committee, right? When the players nearly mutinied and Jim's solution was to put in place a amorphous council that really didn't do anything.
I always wonder how much of that was his idea too. Like that's what I go back is like how much of these were actually his ideas, or was it just him being more of like a yes man and like, yes, I will do this to keep a job here. I got my dream job. Yes, yes, yes. Like maybe a little bit of both, right? We talk about that all the time. There's so many instances back, but the larger point, this is very, very cool to see. And like people respect Billy Donovan. I think it's something Bulls fans aren't used to, or they're getting used to this season. He had the same thing to talk about Coby. I know you wanted to say a couple things about Coby too. What did you think about what he had to say about his development this year? And I know a few weeks ago we talked about Mo Cheeks' influence on him, but more specifically, what stuck out to you with Coby?
I just think that he handled this rocky season very well and with great maturity for somebody who's still, I think, like he just turned 21, like a month or two ago. Second-year player who had a lot put on his shoulders, but also was given a big opportunity in his second season after starting just one game as a rookie. Training camp, you're our starting point guard out of the gate. Earn that spot, okay, you're our starting point guard to start the season. And it didn't go well. To put it bluntly, it did not go well. And we saw not only what we already knew, which is that Coby on the defensive end is certainly still a liability, and paired with a player like Zach LaVine, who, to his credit, improved his defensive game a bit this season, paired together were a problem for the Bulls defensively. But also that Coby didn't appear to have the level of calm, collected decision-making as a point guard on the offensive end, and didn't appear to have great court vision, and didn't appear to know when to look to get a shot for himself or how and when to get his teammates involved as the team's lead guard. We saw those struggles play out, and it got to a point where Billy Donovan benched him and said, I think starting Sato right now might be better for us. And the way that Coby, who had a couple of really rough games when he was playing in that bench role, Sato goes out, Coby comes back in, and he earns the starting job back. And the things that he was saying last night, this quote in particular, a lot of guys my age, especially getting taken out of the starting lineup, you could handle that two different ways. You could pout and say, forget it, or you could just keep playing and continue to get better and continue to stay on the grind. I chose to continue to stay on the grind, and my number got called, and I took advantage of it. There are countless examples of young players in this league who think that they're better than they are and deserve more than they have. Coby is the opposite example of that. From everything that we've seen, from all the evidence we have, this young man is humble and knows that while he is talented, and his talents led him to being a top 10 pick in the NBA draft and a starter in his second season, he said last night, I still have a long way to go. So that's why you can be encouraged by what we've seen from him recently, because he knows I may have gotten better in this second chance that I had to be a starter on this team, but I'm excited thinking about how hard Coby White is going to work this summer. and see what he looks like coming back next season, because he has that kind of work ethic and attitude.
We've seen recent examples of that too. The two different types of young players, just like he's talking about on our own team over this rebuild, right? I think Carter's the opposite player and I don't know, people can say it's one thing to say things that you're going to do or you want to be, and it's another thing to do them. Like Carter would always say, I can be that guy. I'm going to be that starter. I'm going to be this and that and this and that. We just never saw it. It's like Coby, everybody criticized Coby for a month. All he did was put his head down and start working again and continue to how to make those adjustments. I think it's great, man. It shows you the two different types of players. And that's why I say, like, be patient with Coby. Same thing with Patrick Williams. Both of those guys are about it. They don't just say they're about it. And I think that's good things for the future of this Bulls team, man.
I think so too. And, because you just mentioned it, interesting with Patrick Williams and Donovan's comments last night. He said he's going to have another talk with Patrick about passing up open shots, because you did see that
3 too yesterday.
He did. And he had 9 points, which recently sounds like a lot compared to the average of 2 points or 4 points. But I saw multiple occasions where P-Dub passed up a shot last night. One of them was where he thinks about a shot and then decides, you know what? No, I'm going to drive and then look to kick. And it ends up being a travel. That's a problem that he has this season. Coby White has had that problem too early in his NBA career. The indecisiveness of, should I shoot this open shot or should I look to get inside or look to pass? And while you're trying to go through that decision making, your feet move before your brain does and you travel. Shoot. Patrick Williams can shoot. He has shown us that he can knock down shots, whether they're 3 balls or his mid-range shot. The dude can shoot. So it's got to be frustrating for Donovan to be like, I know that this kid's trying to make the right play, and maybe he's trying to pass up a good look for a great look for a teammate. But at the same time, dude, we picked you number 4 overall for a reason, because we see these skills. And the way that you can make those skills even better and more elite than they are now is to continue doing them in game. So, as far as Coby and P-Dub and what happens with them next season, I am wildly curious to see who takes a bigger step. But I am optimistic that they both will take significant steps.
Yeah, me too, man. I'm very excited. Wasn't Patrick Williams the one? Isn't there a play early on in the season? Might have been against the Grizzlies, if I'm not mistaken. But it was Garrett Temple's on the floor. P-Dub's wide open from 3. He passes it off to Garrett Temple. Garrett Temple immediately shoves it right back to him. He's like, shoot it. So, that's the type, that's another guy. Maybe next week when we go through our evaluations, we could talk a little bit more about Garrett Temple. But he's low key. If he's not team MVP this season, in the leadership and off the court stuff, it's got to be Thad or Garrett. Both of those guys have been invaluable this season, man. I think we should hear from Thad. I will say this: we didn't mention it yesterday, but I do find it interesting. I think there are many layers to what he said about the organization being fully transparent and open to communication, top to bottom. When we talked about him maybe throwing Boylen under the bus or throwing a little jab at Boylen, I don't know if that was just Boylen. So that's something to think about too as well. But that is very, very knowledgeable when he speaks. I want you to hear about Zach LaVine, though, somebody closest to him. There's a couple of other things here I hope you catch, and everybody else out there listening. Cowley asked him a couple questions about LaVine, asked him what he thought about his development this year.
I know you guys talk a lot after these games and have kind of team discussions about what just transpired. And where do you think, you've known Zach for a while. Where do you think he is as far as a leader, as far as a voice that people follow? Is that still a work in progress for him? Or do you think he can be that it guy, that guy that kind of leads the troops when they need it, whether it's a down situation or a disappointing loss or whatever?
I think this year was definitely a growth year for Zach, for the simple fact of he was more vocal than anything. He always voiced his opinion. He helped guys out throughout the course of games. He went out there and he got out there defensively. Offensively, we all know what he can do. He led by example each and every day. I just think that this year was really a big period of growth for him. And I think that he can, lead this franchise and take this franchise to the next level. Obviously, with trading for Vooch, that helps out a lot. Zach has been great all year long. Like, he's taken on every situation and task that we've asked of him, and he's went above and beyond to try to do his best job he can as far as going out there and leading the troops. And I think he's done a great job of that. But the growth period has been great for him.
How important was it for him to grab that defensive element for that leadership role? Because it seems like a guy really can't preach about defense if he's not trying to play defense.
I think that was one of the most important parts, the most important keys. I've been staying on him all season long. Billy and the coaches have been on him all season long, and tell him that that's the next level of growth for him. That he has to be a two-way guy. Can't just play one side of the basketball because it's not going to help you win games. And I think he's taking on that challenge, and he should get better each and every day as far as like exerting the same energy on both ends of the court.
Some good stuff to hear from our all-star. Any thoughts top of mind for you when hearing about that with Zach going long-term, maybe reflecting a little bit on the season?
I mean, it's nice to hear Thad with that vote of confidence in Zach. And the follow-up with Callie about the defense was such a pointed question, basically calling Zach out for that. And I think that we have seen Zach make a noticeable effort to get better on that end. Not to say that you have to be an elite two-way player to be a good leader on your team. Certainly doesn't hurt if you can be telling your teammates what to do, not just on the offensive end when you're running things and saying, hey, all right, get on my shoulders, but also for the same thing for big key defensive possessions. You want to be a guy who's on the floor, not getting subbed out for defensive possessions because you can't play a lick of defense. Not that that's really ever something that Zach dealt with, but I think Zach's gotten to a point now where he is a vet. Thad was a vet when Zach was a rookie. And yes, Zach still looks up to Thad as somebody who's been in the league a lot longer than him and is older than him, but they're both vets now. And as much as we talk about Thad Young's value of leadership on this team because he is the elder statesman, he's the UD of the Bulls right now, Zach has to be the guy. That is something that was interesting with the dynamic of the baby Bulls and then the Derek Joakim Bulls, because Derek led by example on the floor, but was never much of a vocal leader in the locker room, in the huddle at halftime. That was Joakim. That was Luol. Those were the vocal, glue leaders of the team. It's the ideal scenario if your team's best player is also your team's leader. And that, hearing Thad speak to that about Zach's potential to be that kind of guy is encouraging.
100%. I agree with everything you just said. I think it is truthful to say that Zach has been overall this season more consistent with his defense and also improved at the same time. But I think there were pockets throughout the season of a week or 2 weeks where there were games where it was like, dude, what are you doing? You don't look the same as you did a month ago or 6 weeks ago when we were clawing back from 20 plus and you were exerting energy on both sides. I think the addition of solid key role players, consistent role players, is going to help Zach be able to exert energy on both sides. He won't feel like he has to go out there and score 45 and also play 40 minutes at a high level of defense. Help around him will help be able to do both of those. It is good to hear a vet talk about him that way. Because like I say, man, I think Zach is entering his prime right now. I think this was his first year of truly his prime. And that next step to kind of unlocking things is off the court stuff. We know what your ability is on the court. What else can you do off the floor? And I think him saying leading by example is awesome. We don't ever hear him go out there and bitch and complain to the media, anything like that. Not when it's not warranted. And so I think that leads a good foundation for guys like Patrick Williams, Coby White, who are going to be here long-term. And I think it's kind of already reflecting on Coby with what we just talked about. Instead of talking and not backing it up, just go put the work in and show people and prove them wrong. And I think Zach has done just that. So important. Did you catch any vibes from Thaddeus Young? Like it sounded like he might not be here when it starts next season. Like, did you get that at all, or am I just overthinking it?
I mean, maybe there was a hint of that, but if anything, I don't think it was necessarily purposeful from Thad. I think you're just hearing a vet who's been in the league a long time and knows the business side of the NBA. Dude's been on how many teams at this point in his career? The guy's been everywhere. And while he knows how valuable he's been to this team this season compared to last season when he wasn't allowed to play his game, and he knows also, hey, the last year on my Bulls contract is a partial guarantee. Maybe AK and Eversley are champing at the bit to change things up, and maybe I will be a casualty of freeing up money for them to do what they want to do next. Maybe I'll stick around because they value not only my leadership but how effective I've been on the court this season. I think he just knows that it's far from certain that he will be back next season because of all of the pieces of context that we have with this big offseason that the Bulls' new front office have ahead of them.
Considering the trade pieces that are actually available, I think he's the most valuable trade piece that we have, right? Going into the offseason, and that could mean something, especially if Markkanen walks for nothing, or you don't re-sign him. Like, those are things, if you miss out on the point guard situation as well, like, those are things you're going to need to take calls on, and I think you're right, man. You're totally right. He knows the business, and he gets it, and I think he feels okay, and I think maybe Zach feels okay if something does happen and he ends up leaving or getting traded. Like that would be like another turning point for Zach's career. It's like, hey, your vet left you now. Now do your thing. You don't need him as like a little bit of a crutch anymore. You get to spread your wings and be you and be that final guy, a final stage of Zach's career. Speaking of Lowry, real fast before we get out of here, did Billy Donovan save his potential opportunity here with the Bulls, or is that him just being a nice guy and hoping other people hear that throughout the offseason?
Yeah, I think Billy Donovan was just being a professional with those comments. He's not wrong when he was talking about Lowry having a good game last night. But beyond that, he's also not wrong to say that Lowry has handled this difficult season very professionally himself. And he has been nothing but class from the mouth of Billy Donovan. Lowry being a team player, Donovan talking about how Lowry has sacrificed a lot. All the changes that have happened with this team this season, him being a bench player for the first time in his NBA career and dealing with that as well as you could hope. It's also worth pointing out that Donovan said, I haven't talked to AK and Eversley about Lowry and the contract situation. Maybe that's true. Or maybe Donovan's just feeling like that conversations he's had with AK and Eversley about Lowry's future are not for public knowledge quite yet. There's also still a potential situation for a sign and trade that the Bulls might be able to work out and not lose Lowry for nothing and be able to get something from his departure if he does in fact depart. And I still think that that's the most likely outcome here. A couple of solid games off the bench, including last night where it's like, oh yeah, Lowry was 6-9 from downtown, had 20 points, chipped in 7 boards. Cool, man. When Lowry's not knocking down his threes, we have found ourselves asking, well, what else can this guy do? And to do that against a J League, Toronto team, I don't know if it's swaying that many eyes to look towards Lowry, but even in spite of this tough season that he's having, we've heard word that several teams, San Antonio among them, are prepared to throw some kind of significant bag at Lowry this summer, which means I think that he's gone. But Billy Donovan can still voice his appreciation for what Lowry's done in this difficult season that it's been for him, and also maybe try to, as best as possible, leave multiple avenues open for the Bulls as far as how they handle Lowry's departure and if they can get something out of it.
It's interesting. There's a lot This is definitely we almost could spend a whole episode on next week, man. Because I'm still like in the back of my mind, I'm curious if Donovan does see something the similar way and I know Gallinari, he was a guy that was a little bit older than Lowry, had a little bit more of experience, but the way he was sort of able to transform him in OKC after coming in the trade from the Clippers, I'm always curious if he wonders if he could tap into the same type of skills and strengthen those skills that he was with Gallinari, because they're very similar players. I would say like right now, Lowry's ceiling is probably higher than what Gallinari's is. Lowry's a better shooter than he is, maybe not a better rebounder or passer, but I think there's skills there that he notices that are very, very similar. And like, I was able to untap that. Maybe I could do it with Lowry too. Me saying that, is this maybe Donovan's little way of saying, hey, Lowry, if you want things to work and you don't really necessarily care about the money, maybe come back here and find a role that fits you. I don't know if that is there. I'm just asking questions. It's interesting about the Spurs, though.
I think that's tough unless he's willing to be a bench guy on a bench guy contract, which last offseason certainly didn't sound like the case. It certainly sounded like the Bulls and Lowry and his agent were $4 or $5 million apart as far as annual salary in their negotiations for an extension. And instead of going out and proving that he was worth that extra money, he had a season where at the end of it, we're questioning, is he even worth what the figures that the Bulls were offering last offseason? And maybe he's not. But Lowry has still told us that he believes he's a starter in this league. And he thinks if he's a starter, that he should be making starter money. So maybe Donovan is in one way interested in retaining Lowry as a quality bench player, because he certainly could be that. But it doesn't sound like that's what Lowry would be satisfied to do.
Yeah, it's weird. He falls like into the category of like Bobby Portis almost. Like it's like he's super effective coming off the bench. Didn't score at the clip that Bobby did off the bench, but still like playing that role. There was a fit for that role in the NBA, and you could play for a very long time doing that. I just don't know. Like you said, I don't know if Markkanen knows if his skills have hit the ceiling yet. He believes in being a starter. Maybe he'll go chase that. The Spurs thing is interesting. We need to talk about that next week. That being said, man, 331-979-1369, text messages, voicemails, anything you got for us. You want to react to anything that we talked about today, maybe something that you heard, whether it be Thaddeus Young or Billy Donovan. Give us your thoughts. Last 2 games this weekend happening, so we want to start getting your season evaluations. Don't be shy. Feel free to drop us a voicemail, 331-979-1369. Text messages, too. You can always tweet at us at Jordan C. Maly, at Bulls_Peck, and at Locked On Bulls. For Matt Peck, I'm Jordan Maly. Bulls Nation, have a wonderful weekend. Enjoy the wrap-up of the regular season. Be back on Monday to break it all down. For Jordan and Matt, we are out. Deuces.